Hello and welcome to this episode of Club Thrive, the podcast with me, Kate Sterling. I'm very excited to be back. I just was off for a week or two. We were away and I did a podcast when we were away, and then we all got COVID, and so actually it really wiped me out and I wasn't very well, and I also used it as an opportunity to take some proper time to recover. So I'm feeling a lot better for having taken that time, and it is a real reminder of how actually time out is super powerful. And I really took some time to zoom out from everything that I've been doing, to tap into where I've been feeling a bit drained, and also to make sure I'm heading in the direction I want to go in with work. Because I think sometimes when we're self-employed, we can very quickly end up kind of going off in a slightly different direction, even without realising it, because we're scared of not earning enough money, or we're worried about what happens if we don't work. And I actually didn't realise that I had these fears. I didn't realise that the undercurrent of me not properly taking time off was that actually I think I was a bit scared about not working. And it's really weird when you start to tap into these things, and it's why I do the work that I do, because it helps you to really identify where you as well might be kind of almost ironically holding yourself back for these fears. Because really, even though on paper it felt like I was working, I was exhausted, and I hadn't really appreciated how tired I was. I hadn't really been taking into consideration how much effort being a parent is, and I hadn't really been giving myself that credit for acknowledging that, you know, even though I've been working as a coach for over 22 years, I'm on a kind of different journey now with what I'm doing. And a lot of that has been as well facing up to the ways that I've been holding myself back, with putting myself out there a bit more unapologetically. So that's what this week's episode is actually kind of has been inspired by, because firstly, do take breaks, especially if you are self-employed and you are feeling exhausted, because I have so much energy that I didn't have a couple of weeks ago. I've had all this time to really zoom out and decide where I want to go next. I have come up with loads of new ideas, which is also a bit of a problem when you kind of have loads of ideas and you want to act on all of them. But really, it's given me a lot of clarity. And I think sometimes when we're working by ourselves, and if you can relate to this with maybe you get loads of ideas, I get a bit overwhelmed. I have so many ideas. I'm like, I don't even know where to start with them. And as well, when you're trying to build an income and you're trying to build that sustainability alongside perhaps being a parent or juggling all these other things, supporting family members, supporting partners, maybe you're on a journey, you've just had a breakup, you've got all this other stuff kind of going on, is to really acknowledge that we use a lot of energy and time and space almost thinking about these things. And space is something that comes up a lot with clients when they crave space. And I'm like, yes, I'm the same. And actually, you know, we are all so similar. And sometimes it can be very easy to band us into different boxes or to put us into different groups, and to forget that actually a lot of us have similar challenges, even if we seem on paper to be polar ends of a spectrum, opposite end of a spectrum. And as always, I say with this podcast, I try really hard to keep one train of thought and to finish the thought. Sometimes you'll find I maybe jump about. So I'm going to try and keep it in line with my notes to keep this succinct. But today's episode is all about exploring this fear of potentially being seen as vain and whether that is impacting you with your choices. Now, the reason I have chosen this as a topic this week is that I've always found it useful to link it back to things that I've experienced to hopefully make it a bit more relatable, but also because it comes up, a lot of these things come up with clients when I'm working with people. And it's come up a lot over the years, you know, when I was working as a PT, this whole concept of our bodies and what we look like, and also our perceptions of ourselves. And this started a few weeks ago, really, or actually probably, to be honest, this is something I've been pondering about for probably a couple of years. And there's this funny push and a pull when it comes to vanity and caring about our appearance, where we maybe really want to put effort and time and focus into it, but we're worried about being seen as vain, and we're worried about being seen as inauthentic or not genuine or attention seeking, or perhaps, I mean, there are so many negative connotations to it, or we're obsessed, or, you know, and I think especially if you've been in a place where you have had challenges with your body, I think, and this is what I've kind of explored over the last couple of weeks, is that there are fears there. And this is something that, I have pondered over the last couple of years. If you have been someone who has had a challenging relationship with your body, there are fears of going back there. There are fears of that obsession creeping back in. There are fears of kind of being seen to be obsessed about your body. And it's almost as though we go the other way to say, no, look, I'm fine. And I have definitely done that myself when it comes to even with food. I've said yes to eating things when I don't always necessarily want to eat it, just to prove that I'm okay. And there is obviously this world that we live in now where everyone shares their opinions, where we have a lot of information. And so we kind of also don't want to be seen as alienating anyone, especially if you have strong values and morals around being kind and being inclusive. It's almost like we don't want to reach our full potential in case we stand out that much, in case our success is so big as a result of doing that we put people that we love into a smaller box, in case we take away that attention from people that we love, in case, or we think that perhaps we don't want to enjoy the possibilities because people that we've loved have had a challenging time, or that we don't deserve it because of things that have happened in our lives, whether that's been self-inflicted or as a result of situations that we found ourselves in. And all of these things run in this kind of background tab in our brains that we don't even know is kind of running at all the time, which is what then informs our choices and is what then informs the decisions we make. It informs whether you put on the effort, make the effort to, wash your hair and dry it before you leave the house, or whether you care about the makeup that you use, or whether you care about what your body looks like. And sometimes, because we also are living in a world where we're told we must embrace every aspect of us and accept ourselves, then there's this kind of tricky dichotomy as well of, well, I really want to push my body as far as I can get it, and I really want to look a certain way, but I also don't want to be obsessed about it, and I don't want to be seen as vain, and I don't want to be seen as attention seeking. Like all these things, you see, it goes back into that same circle, all that stuff I was just talking about. And so this whole episode is about, do you have a fear of being seen as vain? Is there a concern there that you don't want to be judged in a certain way? And is that stopping you from actually, truly, authentically exploring who you want to be? And for me, that has absolutely 500% been a massive thing in my life. I've got goosebumps. Like I almost feel borderline emotional thinking about it because it puts us into such a box. And what it also suggests, and I was thinking about this over the last week while I was thinking about this episode, was does it then mean that we hold judgment for the people that we kind of also want to be? Do we hold judgment for the models that spend that time kind of, in makeup and hair and putting on the clothes to be photographed in a certain way? Is there judgment about that? Is there a sense of, that's not a very valuable part of the world? Like we should be saving the world by looking after the environment more, and we should be stopping all the world wars. And I think there is a deep undercurrent of care and of love for the world and for people around us. And so, that's one end of a spectrum. And then when you've got something at the other end that can feel so superficial and so just like materialistic, we judge it because it's kind of as though we're not good people for wanting to also explore these things. And over the last couple of years in my own exploration of self-exploration and authenticity is this interesting link between kind of appearance and expression through clothing and my work as an actor and as a creative and as someone who also wants to be on a stage. And this thing as well with my work of, I really, really, really want to do really well, but oh my God, I had a lot of mindset blocks around money. And so all of these things link up together because they create a narrative, they create a story of what we can and we can't do, and they create that kind of element of, we shouldn't do this because that is bad, and we attach labels to it. Like how you might have done or we might have done with food in the past. We bunch it up into good or bad kind of sections or good or bad exercises. Whatever it is, even if we're not aware that we're doing it, we label these things, and then that has an impact on our feelings towards them. So say, for example, you've, really wanted to go and buy something really, really nice for yourself, like a new dress or something, I don't know, or a pair of trousers, but it costs a fair bit of money. And you've got blocks around money because you kind of think that spending a lot of money is bad. And then you also have blocks around it because that item of clothing might draw attention to yourself and you don't want to be seen as vain. You're stuck you're not then going to go and buy those clothes out of joy, because you're going to feel guilty about spending the money, and then you're going to feel bad about wanting to wear them in the first place. And then those clothes, whether you buy them or not, are either going to you're going to regret not buying them, or you're going to buy them and never wear them because you feel so shameful that you've got them. And then this shame and this guilt and this, do you see how it's also amazingly linked? And I don't mean that like as a pointing the finger. And do you see, it's more like, oh my God, it's mind-blowing how much our brain has this impact on how we feel and the actions that we take. And so what I'm going to give you in this episode is just kind of a lot of thoughts about what I've discovered about it, with some of the questions I've explored, to help you to explore whether there are blocks that are holding you back. Because when we draw attention to the feelings and the things that we think, then we're able to understand whether we agree with them or whether actually there's a different perspective that we want to explore. And so I actually looked up the word vain. I think it's always really handy to look up these words that we might be interested about or intrigued by, to understand the bigger meaning of them. And words have a ton of value. I've never really, after my divorce, the words that people would say to me really impacted me. And we can hold on to them. The language that we hear, especially in the ways that it's directed or the context in which it's used, is super powerful. And so it can be very handy to look up these words to understand what they mean, because we will have learnt that when we learn the words, and then we've also attached other meaning to them. And so it's a good way of understanding what they do mean. Sometimes we have misinterpretations of them. And it's also a good way of understanding that language does have power, and how we hear things, how we interpret things, and how we speak to ourselves as well is super important, because that's what the story is, what drives the narratives, drives the stories, drives the kind of worlds in which we live. Likewise, how we hear words. You and I could hear the same sentence completely differently depending on our experiences in life. And so it's this deeper connection to yourself that really can kind of give you that space to question things when you have thoughts that come in, rather than just taking them as fact. So anyway, that was a long-winded way of saying here's what vain means. So vain, as a kind of just a single word from the Oxford Languages Dictionary, is having or showing an excessively high opinion of one's appearance, abilities or worth. So vain in this context is having or showing an excessively high opinion of one's appearance, abilities or worth. And then it strings down a whole load of synonyms of other words similar to conceited, narcissistic, self-loving, in love with oneself, self-admiring, self-regarding, wrapped up in oneself. So much negativity. Self-absorbed, self-obsessed, self-centered. Look at all this selfness. Egotistic. I think we get the idea. Swaggering, imperious, peacockish. That's a new word. I didn't know that was a word. Cocky, overweening. Whew. None of those sound particularly great. And then vain also means producing no results, useless. So that's not great either. So when you're doing something in vanity, or in vain, there is also negative connotations there. So this whole word doesn't have many nice things that come out from it. And actually, a lot of these things, maybe it's not a bad thing to be self-loving and in love with oneself. Like, there's a lot of work now, obviously, and I'm big kind of believer in this, is kind of believing in yourself and having that self-worth and having that self-love. And in that respect, well, if that's linked to vanity, then I'm very, very vain, because I don't go around thinking I'm the queen of the world, but I do have that respect for myself that comes out from that deep self-love. And, I was listening, I can't remember, I think it was probably a Gabor Mate quote or something like that was basically saying that children are extremely narcissistic because they're just kind of concerned about themselves all the time. And actually sometimes narcissism obviously is not necessarily a very great quality if that's all we're focused on, but sometimes we do have to care about ourselves in order to be there for other people. And I guess selfishness comes out of that as well. And I'm not saying go around and be narcissistic, but depending on the concept that you have of these words will impact the decisions that you have in your choices. And so how I've unpacked this over the last couple of weeks is to really acknowledge it. And I think I am someone that for a long time wanted to really embrace creativity with clothing, for example, to really be flamboyant and to really go out there and wear clothes that not necessarily drew attention to myself, but that was what stopped me. That fear of being seen, that fear of being looked at was what stopped me from buying nicer clothes. And even as a PT, I would turn up to sessions sometimes, in my muddy coat from the last week's session. And I did have a client once say to me, "You look like a tramp," which is not a very nice thing to say. And luckily at the time I'd kind of, that then suggests that there's something wrong with being homeless. And that's not, there's so many caveats to these things. The words we use are really powerful, and we need to be conscious of the words that we use, because that suggests that, being a tramp is not a good thing. And there are, lots of people are homeless out of very, very, very sad and unfortunate situations. It doesn't mean that they have any less value as a human at all. And so we have to be careful about this, because we do then, bundle things up into different identities. And anyway, that was a slight curveball, kind of off the tangent there. But for me, this judgment that I was having of myself of, well, I'm an actor, but I don't feel very comfortable kind of being like, "Hi, here I am." And yet I would also kind of really admire people like Florence Pugh and, Emily Blunt even, who just kind of go out there and look fabulous and do their thing, and they wear their clothes without, maybe they're nervous as hell, who knows, but they wear these flamboyant clothes that kind of do draw that attention to themselves. And I think what I started to uncover was that I judged that too. I wanted to be that type of person, but I was also judging it, because I was like, "Well, that's a bit like self-centered," or "That's a bit, how do you draw attention to yourself like that?" And when you realize that, it's a bit like, but I'm not a judgmental person. But we judge things, even if you have the best morals and values in the world in your terms, we still have these opinions. And it's about drawing attention to them to understand that we have them, to say, "Oh, okay, well, I don't think that's true, actually." And this is where that discussion and that kind of discourse that you can have with yourself comes in. You have this one side, this one voice that's saying, "I really, really, really want to be," I'm just going to use this as an example, like a really successful actor or businesswoman, and I want to wear the nicest clothes. I want to spend a lot of money on nice clothes. But then you've got another voice saying, "But hang on, that's really bad, because there are some people that can't even afford to eat. That's going to draw loads of attention to yourself, which is really vain. And also, we need to save the planet, and we need to save the world." And then it's like, well, I'm definitely not going to spend those clothes now. I'm that money on those clothes now. And so all of these things come together to then impact your decisions. And so I've really unpacked it myself. I've really gone and questioned what do I judge? Why am I judging it? Is it true? No, I actually really do want to shift this identity. It's an identity shift. It's about saying, who do I want to be now? Never mind who you were before. And, it's not about spending beyond means. It's not about saying, well, I'm now going to buy everything to make myself look a certain way. It comes as an extension of the inside of you. If we try and put these clothes on us or this look on us without doing that inner work and that inner development, we are still not going to feel comfortable in those clothes. But if it's come from that extension from within, we're still going to feel vain. If it's come from that extension of within, of shifting these mindset things that we have and these beliefs that we have, then wearing those clothes is a sign of self-expression. And you wear the clothes and you're like, here I am, and this is joyous. This energy surrounding it is positive. There's none of that negativity that comes into vanity when you think of it like that. It becomes a different thing. But really on paper, it could be the same thing. You will have someone like me before I kind of explored all this thinking that's vain. Whereas me, that future version that's kind of done the work and said, actually, no, this is a sign of my self-expression, is having the best time. And there isn't that judgment. And wow, that is cool. And that is super freeing. And so are you judging who you aspire to be? And you can use this across everything, whether it's money or, what are you labeling as good as bad? Whether it's with your health, what do you label as good as bad? Who is it that you want to be, but you're kind of not able to get there because you're also judging it, or you're kind of thinking that you can't do it, or that there are blocks in there. What else is going on? Get out a bit of paper and ask yourself that. What am I judging? Who am I judging? Why am I judging it? What do I believe? What do I really want? What am I not giving myself permission to say? Oh, that feels uncomfortable, but I'm going to go in there and I'm going to explore it. And what happens if I get that thing? What am I scared of really getting? Often there will be fears there too. So there'll be a fear of being seen. There'll be a fear of being judged. There'll be a fear that someone else might change their opinion of you. There'll be a fear that you're going to make someone that you love feel differently about you, or that you're going to move beyond, whether it's a friendship group or a lifestyle or whatever it is. And it's like a breakthrough. It's a breaking through a glass ceiling that we have created for ourselves. All of these mini things are shifts, mini breakthroughs, mini kind of adjustments into who we want to become. And if we don't do them, if we don't work through them, then we stay where we are, which is not always a bad thing. It's not like I've had a bad life. I mean, some of it's been pretty tough, but this is me saying right now, I want to change things. I don't want to stay where I am now. I'm kind of all right here now, and I'm kind of over it. Actually, I want to go somewhere new. And so what beliefs are hidden here? Like the perception that you have even of money that you want to spend on those clothes, or the perception of, I never bothered about healthcare really. I never bothered about my skin. I never bothered about spending money on skincare products. But now I'm like, oh, actually my skin is an organ and I respect it differently. And it's not like I'm going to go and get, worried about my wrinkles. I've got wrinkles, and this is the balance. There's a fear there. There is a fear of getting obsessed, because in the past, looking back, I had an eating disorder. I had anorexia when I was 16, and there is a fear of getting that obsessed again. And so when you unpack it and you see actually that you are protecting yourself in some ways, then you can negotiate with yourself to make the choice that is going to be safe for you, whilst also pushing the boundaries. Because if we don't push our own boundaries, we don't get to where we want to go. And there is that disconnect between what you want and the belief in yourself of what is possible. So the same too with your body. It's okay to care about your appearance. There's all this stuff that as a mum, when a lot of mums feel like they can't lose their baby weight, and I'm here to say, if you want to lose it, cool, do it, but do it from a place of self-compassion, do it from a place without judgment, and be unapologetic about it. If you want to get fit and strong again, go for it. That doesn't mean that it's bad if someone doesn't want to do that. We are all individuals, and it's about tapping into what is important to us as the individual, not about worrying about what anyone else is going to say. That's taken me a long time to get to that point, and I'm always going to have to keep working through that. These are things that we will constantly have to keep shifting, because when you push through a certain barrier or a block or a ceiling or whatever, you're going to encounter a whole new realm of things that you need to overcome. It's not a bad thing, it's just a fact. And then it makes it lighter and freer, and like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to hit a bit of a confidence dip potentially when I go into that new environment, because it's new and I don't know it. And then it gives you that compassion to say, well, okay, I'm just newer at this, and I'm gonna feel a bit nervous putting on that outfit, and I'm gonna kind of just try something new, but I'm not going to judge myself for it. And linking it to your values. If you, at your core, are someone that has values that, are kind and compassionate and care about other people, the clothes that you wear do not change that. The clothes that you decide to put on your body do not change the fact that you are an amazing person. And so when we link things up in different ways, it means that we're not suddenly not something. It's not binary. We're not something if we do something else. There's, this complete and utter shift of things into lots of possibilities